सम्प्राप्ते सन्निहिते काले नहि रक्षति युक्तिञ्चरणे भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज मूढमते मूढजनी धनागम कृष्णा कुरु सद्बुद्धिं मनसि कृष्णा यल्लभसे निज कर्मोद्वाटं वित्तं तेन विरोधय चित्तम् भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज मूढमते नारी सनभरनाभिवेशं दृष्ट्वा माता मोहावेशम् एतन्मांसव साधिकारम् मनसि चिन्तय वारं वारं भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज मूढमते नलिनी गलगत जलमतितरलम् तद्वज्जीवितम् अतिशय चपलम् विधियाद्यभिमानग्रस्तम् लोकम् शोकरक्तम् च समस्तम् भज गोविन्दम् भज गोविन्दम् गोविन्दं भज यावत् वित्तोपार्जन सत्य तावत् निज परिवारो रक्त पश्चाद्जीवति जर्जर देहे वाताकोऽपि न पृच्छति गेहे भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज यावत् पवनो निवसति देहे तावत् पृच्छति कुशलं देहे गतवति मायौ देहापाये आर्या विद्यते तस्मिन् काये भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज बालस्तावत् क्रीडासक्त तावत् तरुणस्तावत् तरुणीसक्त वृद्धस्तावत् चिन्तासक्त परे ब्रह्मणि कोऽपि न सक्त भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज काते कान्ता कष्टे पुत्र संसारोऽयमतीव विचित्र कस्य त्वं कः कुत आयाता तत्त्वं चिन्तय तैः प्राता भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं भज मूढमते सत्सङ्गत्वे निस्सङ्गत्वं निस्सङ्गत्वे निर्मोहत्वं निर्मोहत्वे निश्चलतत्वं निश्चलतत्वे जीवन्मुक्तिः भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं भज मूढमते वयसि गते कः कामविकारा शुष्के नीरे काकासारा क्षीणे मित्रे का परिवारो ज्ञाने तत्त्वे का संसार भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज मूढमते माता धन जन यौवन गर्वं हरतिनेशा काला सर्वं मायामयमिदम् अखिलं हित्वा ब्रह्मपदं प्रविश विदित्वा भज गोविन्दम् गोविन्दं भज मूढमते दिव्रयामिन्यौ सायं प्रातः शिशिरवसन्तौ पुनरायाता काला क्रीडति गच्छत्यायु तरतिरञ्जत आशावायु भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज मूढमते काते कान्ता चिन्ता बहुरा किं तव नास्ति यन्ता कृतजनि सज्जन सङ्गतिरेका भवति मानव तरणे औका भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज मूढमते सम्प्राप्ते सन्निहिते काले नैरक्षति किं करणे नैरक्षति किं करणे. Thank you. So we stopped last day with verse 13. Kate kanta anagata chinta vatura kim tava nasti niyanta. And as we discussed in this verse, and this is the last verse in the first half or first part of the text, from verse 14 onwards, we have the disciples of Shankara contributing their own thoughts to this composition. But here Shankara is saying, please, teaching us not to be anxious about wealth and about family concerns. He's enunciating, as I said, the ideal of karma yoga. How to perform action without being anxious about the outcome. So he says that there is a niyanta. There is one who is in control. There is Ishvara, who we understand in our tradition as Karma Phaladata, the one who ensures the outcome of the action. So that as human beings, we can act, we can make choices, we can put forth appropriate efforts. But we must recognize also that we can never guarantee an outcome. The phala is not always within our control. So understanding that, what he advises is that we don't be anxious. We do our best. We work on those things that we can work on, but recognize that we don't control all the factors in determining an outcome. So it's an advice about acting without anxiety. And so now, in verse 14, and this is a tradition of this text, we have a contribution from one of his disciples, Padmapada, who offers us a verse here. Now, what we will see in a series of verses from Shankara's disciples is a sort of keep in mind that this text was, if we go by the dates of Shankara, he lived in the 8th century. Sometimes his books are put around 780 to 820. So that's the period in which we think Shankara lived. So this is a time in which we are looking at this at this text. So his disciples are commenting about false religion, about false practice. So he has given a teaching now in the first 13 verses, and his disciples obviously are concerned about false religion or false religious practitioners. And the basis of their concern or the basis of their criticism is that even in the life of a religious person, even in religious practice, we must not sacrifice our reason. Religion does not ask us to abandon rational thinking. We have to exercise the best of our intelligence in the field, in the sphere of religion. And so, when it comes to thinking about religious matters, it is very important, as we will see, these disciples are saying, we have to have a clear understanding of what is the problem. Religion is a cure. That's one way to think about it. Religion is a therapy. It's a cure. But it's a cure or a therapy for a particular kind of problem. In that sense, it's very much, a sort of medical structure. And you can see that in the way which the Buddha taught. He was employing a traditional methodology of teaching. What is the problem? That's always the first question. What is the problem? What is the cause of the problem? Thirdly, is there a cure? And then fourth, what is the cure? That's the traditional structure in which all Hindu great philosophers and theologians have taught. You have to say what the problem is, where it comes from, whether there's a solution, and what that solution is. So if you do not understand what exactly the problem is, it's a fair question. What is the human problem? Every religious tradition offers some understanding or some name or some label for what the human problem is. In the Christian tradition, it's a language of sin. That's the human problem. If you ask a Christian, what is it? What is the fundamental human problem? They would say it's sin. If you ask most of the great Hindu teachers, they would say it's avidya. It's a problem of, so knowledge again, it's a problem of a lack of wisdom, understanding the nature of reality. So these disciples are saying that if one doesn't have a good understanding of what the problem is, you can go astray. You can spend your whole life wandering for a solution because you don't know what you're trying to solve. So there was a person story about this person who had lost a needle in his house. And so he was looking, there was a street lamp and he was looking for this, people saw him looking under the lamp. I said, what are you looking for? I'm looking for a needle. Where did you lose the needle? I lost it in my house. Why are you looking here? Because the lamp is here. So you have to find out where the problem is, and there alone you can find the solution. So we will look at and see, what is it that the disciples are concerned about, and we'll start with verse 14. And when we're doing it in the verses, I repeat the lines so that we can memorize them. Jatilo mundi lunchita kesha, Jatilo mundi lunchita kesha, Kashayambar Bahukrita Vesha, Kashayambar Bahukrita Vesha, Pashyanna Pichana Pashyati Mudho, Pashyanna Pichana Pashyati Mudho, Yudara Nimittam Bahukrita Vesha, Yudara Nimittam Bahukrita Vesha, Jatilo mundi lunchita kesha, Kashayambar Bahukrita Vesha, Pashyanna Pichana Pashyati Mudho, Yudara Nimittam Bahukrita Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Govindam. So Shankara, who's associated with this composition, one of the, I've told this story before, perhaps Shashi Sami and Prasanna might have told it also. But Shankara, at many places in his commentaries, one of his favorite stories that he would tell is this story about the 10th person. So he repeats this story several times in his great commentaries. Basically, it's a story about 10 disciples who were studying with their teacher. And so one day they went on a walk, a hike, we call it today. And they came to a river. It was a raging river. And they had to cross this river to continue the hike. So they all went into the river. And when they came on the other side of the bank, they got separated in the river. So they were worried whether they all made it safely. So the leader called everyone together and he took a count. And he found that he was only finding 9. Every time he counted, there were only 9. So he counted and recounted, and it was always only 9. So in the story, so they sat there and they were, very sad and in sorrow that they lost their friend, called the 10th person, was lost. And in the evening, some woodcutter was returning and saw this young boy sitting there and wondered, what was the problem. So he asked, why are you here so late? And you're obviously very distressed. What had happened? So they explained what had happened. And he took a look and he says, no, I think that your friend is not lost. How did you arrive? So he's trying to understand the problem. How did you arrive at the conclusion that your friend was lost? So they said what happened and what they did. So he said, let's try again. Let's see how many of you are here. He asked the leader to count. And so he counted again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And said, see, it's 9 of us. And then the woodcutter said, you are the 10th person. You are the 10th person. You never counted yourself. You always counted the others and you forgot yourself. So Shankara uses this powerful story of the 10th person, the missing 10th person, to illustrate a classic problem of avidya. Avidya. So the 10th man, and he then went on, you will see in his commentary, look, the 10th person was not separate from them by time. He was here. He was always there. If the 10th person was in the future, then you have to wait for that future moment to come. But the 10th person was not separate from them by time. The 10th person was not separate from them by place. Right? If the 10th person was remote from them, they would have to travel to find him. So there's no separation of time. There's no separation from space. How would they separate? How did they conclude that the 10th person was lost? It was a problem of avidya. Once the man said, you are the 10th person, he saw it was solved. It was right understanding, incorrect understanding, avidya, a problem solved by vidya. Ajnana solved by jnana. So clearly the disciples of Shankara are very steeped in this understanding. That you must know what the problem is before the solution is significant to you. So just imagine, if this 10th person, who was the 10th person? So this is the dilemma. The 10th person was searching for the 10th person. The 10th person was the 10th person searching for the 10th person. How do you solve that problem? You're not going to find the 10th person anywhere. Maybe mysteriously you might discover, I am the 10th person, but very unlikely until someone comes and sees the problem and says, you are the 10th person. So sometimes my teacher would use different kinds of examples, and he would say, have you ever experienced wearing your glasses and looking for them? This is a universal problem that all wearers of glasses have. You have them on, and you conclude that they are not there, and you begin to search. And likely you would discover, I have them on. So he would say, this is a problem where the wearer of the glasses wants to become the wearer of the glasses, tries to become the wearer of the glasses, but the problem is only solved when he or she realizes, I am already the wearer of the glasses. Now, if you look into a mirror, or your child says, what are you looking for, Mom? I'm looking for my glasses, but you have them on. So it's like the whistle. But suppose, now move this to a religious, come to this verse. Jatilo, person who grows the hair very long. Suppose that this 10th person went now searching for the 10th person and came to a teacher and said, this is what has happened. The teacher says, okay, you stay with me. First of all, you must grow your hair long. This my part is, you must grow the hair. Then you will find the solution. So the Jatilo, the teacher would recommend to the 10th person, searching for the 10th person, the solution is you have to have long hair. The problem is that you're cutting this hair. Grow your hair long, stay with me. Or Mundi, you go to another teacher, he says, no, that fellow was wrong. If you were to grow your hair, you will never find it unless you shave it off. So that is the teacher teaching the shaven head. Jatilo Mundi Lunchita Kesha. So these were all, clearly these were religious practitioners that the disciples were aware of. People who grew the hair, there were some who shaved the hair clearly, completely. Then there were the Lunchitakeshas. The Lunchitakeshas were those who plucked the hair off, one by one. Still, there are some practitioners of that, some ascetics, some Jain ascetics actually take the hair off. They are Lunchitakeshas, pluck the hair off. So somebody says, no, you don't have to shave it or grow it long. What you must do is put it off. Then you find the solution. Or then his third line, Kashayam Bara Bahukrita Vesha. Kashayam Bara Bahukrita. Somebody says, no. These fellows are focused too much on hair. That's wrong. That's the wrong plans. Growing the hair, shaving the hair, pulling the hair. What you have to do is put the right clothes on. There's a particular color. Kashayam Bara Bahukrita Vesha. So some say, no. What it means to be religious is to wear the right clothing. And this right clothing is this kashaya, the ochre. Unless you wear these particular clothing, you're not going to find a solution to the problem. So, so Padmapada says, kashayam bara bahukrita vesha. They come in all kinds of all colors of clothing. Then, but he has an interesting line, pashyana pichana pashyati modhu. They see but don't see. Pashyana pichana na pashyati. In what way they see? In the sense that they seem to be practicing something religious. They are attracted to some way of being religious. So they see some value. So in that sense, they see something, but they are not seeing it as it ought to be. Pashyana picha na pashyati. They are not seeing the truth of it. And then he adds, Hidara nimittam bahukrita vesha. So it's a warning that he wants me very careful, because the underlying the motive of many religious teachers might be improper motives. They might be materialistic motives. So even at that time, Hidara nimittam, for the sake of the stomach. But generally speaking, for the sake of wealth, increasing wealth, their teachers have come in many forms and misleading teachers. So, understanding what the problem is, as we will see, is fundamental to its solution. And in this verse, I think there, at least deception, Padmapada is suggesting, deception might operate at least at two levels. So it may be that many people who are following religious ways, there might be a genuine self-deception. They really don't understand. probably never had a good teacher, and therefore they're very pursuing a path that doesn't lead to the right place or where they want to. That's one way, that's a self-deception, but also, given the last line, that that there may be an acquisitive motive in some of these teachers. There could also be an intentional desire to deceive the other for some selfish purpose or some selfish end. The Vedas are very clear, and this is something that I think is very important that Hindus understand, because it is a fact we live in a world in which many teachers come away. Many teachers come away, and many teachers gain authority in teaching as well. So that in the Vedas there's a very clear description of who is the teacher and to whom one should go. A seeker should go. And the two words that I used here are Sthita Prajna, Brahmanishta, Srotriya Brahmanishta. Yes, Srotriya Brahmanishta. So, a teacher, first of all, is a Srotriya. Srotriya comes from Sruti, because another word for Veda is Sruti. It's called Sruti because it was heard, received from a teacher. So Vedas are called Sruti because it's a knowledge, it embodies a knowledge that was passed on from teacher to student. So the teacher is called Srotriya, one who knows. So it shows that to be a qualified teacher in the Hindu tradition, you must have studied. You don't wake up and become a teacher. So a good question would have been, what is the sampradaya that you belong to? Who is your teacher? Who is your teacher? What is the lineage, the spiritual lineage from which you come? Padmapada, for example, is a disciple of Shankara. Shankara had a teacher, Govinda Bhagavad. So there is a lineage, and one has to demonstrate or establish, this is the lineage I belong to, this is the one which you want to study. So that's the first thing. One must be Srotriya. Not Jatilo. Jatilo may be Srotriya, maybe not. You don't judge a teacher by the length of his hair, whether it's long or short, or by whether he can pluck his hair out, without wincing or not. Not by the clothing also. Veda doesn't say, go to one who is Kataya, go to one who is of this color clothing. No. Go to one who is Srotriya, who is learned, who knows, who has studied this tradition, with a teacher, who has a teacher. And the second, she says, Brahmanishtam. So there are two sides of the coin. Second is someone must know, but secondly, in the person's life, this knowledge has to become alive. It has to be rooted in Brahmanishtam. Nishtam means to be full, to be established, to be planted in this wisdom. So in other words, this knowledge must also be reflected in who he or she is, in his or her way of being. Which calls for a certain kind of critical thinking on the part of the student. The teacher must embody what he or she teaches. Nothing there in that description that points to external characteristics. So maybe external characteristics may be the first step, in the sense that if someone is a sannyasi or a monk, you make certain assumptions. So you say, okay, I'll listen. I give you the benefit of the doubt. I will hear what you have to say. But then you have to also judge beyond the color of your clothing or appearance. The other example, I think, which is quite helpful, and you will remember when you studied Bhagavad Gita, after the first teaching from Sri Krishna to Arjuna, Arjuna comes and asks, who is this Sthita Prajna? Who is you have talked about this wisdom, this prajna, this wisdom that you have talked about. But tell me something about the person. How do I know You can think that he's also thinking perhaps of a teacher. How do I know that a person has this wisdom? That this wisdom is full, like Nishta. Sthita is also like Nishta. In the Veda we have Brahma Nishta, and Bhagavad Gita says Sthita Pragya. How do I know the person in whom this knowledge is established? How do I judge? And Arjuna, in his own state of mind, he begins first of all by asking Krishna to give him some external indicators. Sthita Dikim Prabhashita. How would such a person talk? Would I hear a particular intonation in his voice or her voice? Can I recognize the Sthita Pragya by the quality of his voice? He speaks very softly, silently. It's a Sthita Kim Prabhashita. Kim Asita. How does he or she sit? Can a Sthita Pragya sit on a chair? Or must a Sthita Pragya only sit in Padmasana? Lotus position. Is sitting in lotus position a sign that this person is rich in wisdom? So he asks, Kim Prabhasheta, Kim Asita, Brajeta. So how does he, how would I recognize this person, Arjuna? So you can think of all of these, connect with this wisdom. And, it's a very profound reply that Krishna gives. He just dismisses Arjuna's definition. I'm not going to offer it by your definition, Arjuna. You want to know how the person speaks, how he talks, how he sits. But this is what my understanding, this is what I'm asking. Prajahati yada kaman sarvan parthamalokata. When the heart is free from all greed. This is Prajahati yada kaman sarvan parthamalokata. When a person has rid himself or herself of greed. Atman eva atmana tushta, and has found his or her fullness in an inward being, in Atma, in the self. Then I view that person as so he goes in a very different direction with his answer and speaks about the quality of heart and mind. And the prime characteristic being freedom from greed. And contentment. He speaks about contentment that flows from freedom from greed. So I think there's a similar point that Padmapada is making here in this verse, drawing our attention to what is important and what are the right qualities of the religious life. Keeping in mind also, there's another point that one always has to keep in mind when we read this verse, is that all of these are clearly descriptions of what we would call ascetics. The people who are ascetics, they're practicing rigid asceticism, not cutting the hair, shaving it, putting the hair out, and you will see other examples. And we have so many, however you take them, they're all, I think, very cautionary stories about sometimes people can be engaged in so-called religious practices, but for very base ends. You have, the Ravana in the Ramayana we are told, was a great practitioner of tapas. He did a lot of tapas. But what was he doing it for? What was the motivation behind this kind of ascetic practice? It was again, some particular, and they always come to some unfortunate end, or bhasmasur. Anything I touch, she practiced tapas, but to gain the power of anything I touch, I will destroy. There's some destructive motive. So the religious life that is, or religious asceticism that is motivated by by the will for improper ends, is also perhaps what Padmapada might have in mind here. So it's not simply engaging in a practice, but what is the motive? And you will see in the last section of the Bhagavad Gita also, when Sri Krishna is classifying, when he's using the gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas, to classify whether you gift giving, dhanam, or speaking, or yajna, he comes back basically, what is the motive? What is the motive for what you are doing? So two people may give the same gift, and one gives it with an expectation that the receiver will give me back something. And another one does it because with the mentality it is good to give. Datavam iti yadda. It's good to give. To give is a good thing. Clearly, you have a difference between sattvic and rajasic gift. So similarly with religious practice as well, motive is always very important. So next verse is traditionally attributed to Shakaracharya, another disciple of Shankara. And he also makes a similar observation. Angam galitam palitam mundam. Angam galitam palitam mundam. Dashanavihinam jatam tundam. Dashanavihinam jatam tundam. Vriddho yati grihitva dandam. Vriddho yati grihitva dandam. Tadapina munchate yashapindam. Tadapina munchate yashapindam. Angam galitam alitam mundam. Dashanavihinam jatam tundam. Vriddha yati grihitva dandam. Tadapina munchate yashapindam. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Govindam. So, as you know, in our tradition, the ideal human life is visualized or structured as moving in 4 stages. Ashramas, where the ashram system is the life stages. And there's a lot of value, a lot of wisdom in thinking of life in this way. So you have student stage, grihastha or the marriage stage, then a stage of vanaprastha, sort of retirement or semi-retirement. And for those who were interested, there was always the 4th stage, stage of renunciation or sannyasa. Each stage was, one of the virtues of the ashrama system is a reminder that each stage has its goals. And some goals are more appropriate in some stages than other stages. So what your obligations are in life was always in relation to what your stage of life is. So if you are a family person, a grihastha, then we speak about different obligations from being a student. The obligations vary, responsibilities vary, the demands that are made on you vary, depending on the particular ashram that you are in. But the point of the ashrama system cannot be understood apart also from the system of life goals, which we speak of in Sanskrit as purusharthas. So you have ashramas and you have goals, or purusharthas. So 4 ashramas, 4 stages and 4 goals, important goals, which will be wealth, artha, pleasure, karma, ethics, virtue, dharma, and then of course moksha or spiritual wisdom or understanding. The idea here is that as we grow older, if you follow the Hindu path, as you grow older, you will also grow wiser. This is, so at least you're supposed to, if you follow the ashrama system, it is intended to intentionally lead you to wisdom as you grow older. Because you would be reminded in various ways by this tradition And some people still follow it in a different way. I see many people who come to Mandir, they would be traditionally in the Vanaprastha stage of life. I mean, the term Vanaprastha, which is the third stage, literally means forest dwellers. So it suggests, that they were moving to a more contemplative life of study and reflection. They had fulfilled all of their obligations to their children, happily fulfill all obligations. So now the tradition released them. You don't have to be helicopters now. Over your kids, they're grown up now. Now it's time to look at your own growth again. And the growth is a spiritual growth. So you did that by study, by contemplation, and so on. This is the whole purpose of ashrama, of the ashrama system. It can't be seen in abstract. It has to be seen in relation to a particular understanding of the meaning of human life. This is my point. So what Totaka is trying to say in his verse is that if one is not intentional, this will not happen. So he gives us a very frightening portrait down the road of a human being. So Angam Galitam, body is, Angam means the body, it literally means limbs. The limbs of the body are worn out, they are aged. Angam Galitam. Palitam Mundam, the hair, Mundam, or grey. No, or perhaps not there. Or gone. Grey or invisible. Dalitam Mundam. And keep in mind, we're speaking of such an 8th century, when the dental care was not so good. One of the signs of aging would be the loss of teeth. Dashana Vihinam Jatam Tundam. And all of the lost, this person lost all teeth as well. Vridho, a very old person, Vridho Yanti, the person moves about, Grihitwa Dandam, can't walk, has to take the help of a stick, a danda, to move about. So, this person can't carry anybody because of his age, but he still carries something. The last line. He can't carry the weight of anything because of how the body is, but is carrying the weight of desire. Still burdened down. Still burdened. Tadapina munchate yasha pinna. Pinna means a ball. Ball, like a weight. Still being carried around even at that age. The weight of desire. Tadapina munchate yasha pinna. This bundle of, still carrying an invisible bundle. But in this case, a bundle of dissatisfaction, unfulfilled. From a Hindu point, it's a very tragic picture that Totaka offers us. That about the persistence of greed, even when the body is incapable of satisfying it. You may think that it is perhaps even more frustrating to have desires and to have the youthfulness of a body that is perhaps capable of fulfilling those desires is one thing. To have so many desires and being unable to fulfill them is worse. It's a very tragic place to be in. But it also reflects a mind that has not grown in spite of aging. In spite of biological age, there is no growth in wisdom. Throughout this text, what Shankara has been coming back to again and again. Now, please understand, he's saying, I'm not saying that the finite things of the world are not important. We need them. But please also know what their limits are. That's his point. If you don't understand the limits of the finite, you will never overcome, the greed for it. In the very first verse, he said, you remember, he started this text not asking that one gives up wealth, but mudhajati kana agama krishna, give up the thirst for it, the greed for it. One can't give up wealth, but one can get rid of the acquisitive thirst, which can never be fulfilled. Greed, the difference between need and greed is very simple. And Gandhi was always speaking about it. So need is something that can be satisfied. Greed cannot be satisfied. There's no point of satiation. And this picture that he gives us here is a picture of a man, an aged man, who is still in an insatiable want. We've seen also Ma Kuru Dhala Jana Yahovana Garham. Don't be arrogant, he said about Dhana, wealth, or youthfulness, because you can lose them. They're finite things, they're subject to change, they are mutable. So this is the tragic picture that we get here in this verse of this very elderly person who is yet still caught in the grip of desire, who has not understood the limits of the fire. This is not where we want to be. And as we grow older, we want to grow also in wisdom, in contentedness, in peace, with grace. And that's what the Hindu tradition wants to take place. So now Hasta Malaka gives us he's another disciple of Shankara, and he also gives us a picture of a religious practitioner of his time. So this is if we look at verse 16, which we just read, as indicating, an elderly person who has not become a practitioner of a religious way, hasn't become an ascetic, but still full of desires. He says, but even those who take to the religious path can also be in the same place. And he gives us a picture of such a person in verse 16. Agre vandi prishte bhanu, agre vandi prishte bhanu, ratrau chukasa marpita janu, ratrau chukasa marpita janu, kartala vishas kartala vasa, kartala vishas kartala vasa, sarvya munjate asha asha, sarvya munjate asha asha, agre vandi prishte bhanu, ratrau chukasa marpita janu, kartala vishas kartala vasa, sarvya munjate asha asha, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Govindam. So this disciple also gives us a picture of another renunciant, another ascetic. An interesting description. Agre Vandi. So Agre means in front. So this is a person who has nothing. It's a renunciant. So in order to keep himself warm in the winter time, he light fire. Agre Vandi, Prishte Bhanu, or depend on the sun. Behind, at the back is the sun, in front is a fire. And the next line is very interesting. Ratra, what does he do in the night? Chubuka samarpita janu. Sometimes when you feel cold, you want to contract, you bring your body, you make yourself very small, contract your limbs. So he sits in the night, cold, and he has to draw his legs as close as possible to his body, his knees. So that position is called Chubuka samarpita janu. Contracts his body at night. So Agre Vanni Prishte Bhanu, Ratrau Chubuka Samarpita Janu, Karatala Bhikshas. So this person, normally, if you are a renunciant, you may have a pot to go around collecting food, bhiksha. Go around asking for food. But this person doesn't even own a vessel to collect. Collects it in his hand. He has nothing. Karatala Bhikshas takes food from others only with the hand. Some Jain monks also do that. They come for Bhiksha and they eat in the hands. Karatala Bhikshas, Tarutala Vasa, and sleeps beneath a tree. So without a home. Tarapina Muncha Asha Pasha. Even so he says, even this person is still full of desires, greed, like a pasha, like a noose. He still has the noose. The translated literally. Still walks around, without anything, but walks with one thing. The noose of greed is still around the neck. Now, how are we to make? Now we will see as as this section of the text goes on, the other disciples will come and say, but they are also genuine renunciants. Right? And the other disciples will come and offer up comments. It doesn't mean that everyone who has embraced a part of renunciation is a false path. Later on, it is a different perspective. The true renunciant is described. But I wanted to, I think what is happening in this verse, as I said, the previous verse was an example of an ordinary person who's still subject to greed, and here we have a renunciant who the disciple describes as still subject to greed. There is, again, to make a connection like I made before between Bhaja Govindam and Bhagavad Gita, I think there is a similar insight that you would have seen in the Bhagavad Gita. And you remember the verse of Krishna, this was in the second chapter. And he used a very interesting line there. He said, Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehina rasavarjam. Very insightful comment. Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehina. He says, you can separate yourself. You can pull yourself forcefully from those things that you want, from the objects of greed. Just perhaps. Physically you can walk away from the objects of greed, rasa varjan. But it doesn't guarantee that you're going to free yourself from the longing for them. So we have physical giving up, may be helpful if it is done with wisdom, but it still doesn't guarantee the overcoming of greed. Because greed is a condition of the mind. And separating yourself from that which you want may be helpful, but rasa varjan, but the taste, the longing will still persist. Still persist. How does that go? Then he says, param drishpuhani vartati. Only in understanding wisdom. Rasa varjan goes with wisdom, with understanding the limits of these finite things. And generally, in the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, one of the important teachings of Sri Krishna is, and there's a whole sequence of words I would ask you to revisit at the very beginning of the chapter. Na karmana manarambhat naishkaryam purushoshnute. There Krishna was teaching about renunciation. He says, look, Arjuna, it is not merely by giving up that one achieves, one becomes spiritual. Spirituality is not simply giving up things. So he says, not merely by abstention or giving up something in the world you necessarily grow spirituality. Nata sannyasana devasiddhim samadhigachyati. And sannyasa is no guarantee of the attainment of moksha. And he comes to speak there about this inward quality, like it's told in Sthita Prajna. It is the outward renunciation is no guarantee of the inner transformation that is necessary. So someone, I remember there's a beautiful conversation between Ramana Maharishi and one of his disciples. And his disciple was asking him, should I become a sannyasi? And he was saying, well, what is your understanding of what it means? Of course, Ramana was a great renunciant himself. But young man came to him and said, I want to become a sannyasi. And Rama says, what is your understanding of what is sannyasa? He says, it means, do like you to give up everything, to have, not to have a home, not to live with a family, have no clothing and all that. And Rama says, no, that's not what sannyasa is. Sannyasa is when you love everyone as you love yourself. It is a love for all of humanity. That is what is renunciation. It's a renouncing. In other words, it's a renunciation of egoism, of self-centeredness. That's true sannyasa. And this is what we see also in Bhagavad Gita, where in the third chapter, Karmendriyani samyamya ye aste manasa smarana. Exactly as Bhaja Govindam. Karmendriyani samyamya ye aste manasa smarana. One who has given up everything, Arjuna, and sits thinking about it. One who has given up and broods, the mind is still thinking of all that I have given up. Karmendriyani samyamya ye aste manasa smarana. Mithya indriyartam vimudhatma mithyachara sauchyate. I regard as hypocritical. Krishna says mithyachara. A person who's walking is a self-deception. Mithyachara. It's a false way, self-deception. If you give up and yet you're still hanging on to, brooding over these things. I think that is how we should be seeing all of these verses offered here by the disciples of Shankara. In the next verse, your disciple comes back to the point of wisdom. But I'm going to stop here a few minutes later because I have to catch a flight. In a short time. I wanted to have a class today. And so your assignment, please remember, memorization of the text. And I told you what was Mahatma Gandhi's technique of memorizing Gita. Gita was much larger text. And every morning he would stick a verse of the Gita on the mirror before which he was shaving. And then never use that time to memorize. So you might have a better technique for Bhaja Govindam. But it will be very nice because as you can see, every verse is a beautiful gem. It gives us a wonderful spiritual insight and teaching. And therefore, this is how our texts live with us because we memorize them. They were called Shruti. We don't have in fact, scripture, which is the English word, is that which is written. Scripture means something that is written. Shruti is something that is heard, that is preserved in the mind. Not in a written form, because written you can always put it aside. When the verse or the wisdom is in your mind, it is always accessible, wherever you are. A verse that you memorize from a religious text is always accessible to you if it is in your mind. You don't have to find the text to remember it. All during the day, it will be with you. So that's why the memorization is important. And especially as you grow older, it says good for the mind, for the brain also. it staves or keeps off dementia by using it. So this is why our great Vedic Pandits always retained tremendous power of mind, because they were such great memorizers of chunks and chunks of scriptures. Even in old age, they could recall. It's a fact, because they use it. They used it, and they kept a sort of intellectual agility from memorization. So let's start with Bhaja Govindam. So now I have a closing prayer. I'm sorry I had to rush off, but we'll continue. I don't remember what the date is like. But it's there on the...
As a matter of fact, I was going to ask you, will you today, when are you going to come back? Because he remembers the garden that you may